So I'll be presenting about piano music by Black composers, but I have to tell you, this is music that I just love teaching every single year. These are, if I had like a top 10 list, these would be the pieces that are always my go-to for many different students, many different levels of students as well. So my hope today is that not only am I just sharing this music because they're by a Black composer, but really looking at why and how this music can be utilized for the studio, and really looking at specifically the pedagogical benefits that each of your students will gain after learning the music. And then if there's anything else, what I really, really hope is that you see my own passion and my love for the music, and that you too would take that enthusiasm and share it with your students, because I really do think it makes all the difference. When I ever start these type of presentations, if we were in person, I would say if you could think as quickly as possible of as many composers as you can. If you only had 30 seconds and I asked you as frantically and as quickly as possible to list all the composers you could, what would that list look like? And then after a little while, I'll ask people to share that list. We would go around the room. And then I often ask them, were most of the composers dead? Were most of them white? Were most of them male? Or heaven forbid, is it possible that it was all the above, right? And I think that that really sets the tone, right, for this type of presentation or this type of work. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I always like to first emphasize that by no means am I saying that we need to stop teaching Beethoven or stop teaching Bach or Mozart or Brahms or Mendelssohn, right? I think there's absolutely a reason why we um, really have this reverence with these composers, right? Because they've given so much to our field, both performance and teaching, and we love the music. All I'm saying is that in addition, right, in addition to teaching these great, fantastic composers, we ought to also allow other voices come to the table, like Black composers. So I just say that to keep that in mind, that my my aim is not about instead of, my aim is about in addition to. So in addition to the box that you love teaching, we can also find other pieces that perhaps would complement, all of the more standard literature. Also, some of these other composers that I'll be sharing today, they really serve as good predecessors, right? Before these other composers that you love and probably use all of the time. So with that being said, I just like to go ahead and dive in and start looking at the music. One obstacle that I often hear is that teachers don't feel that they have enough resources to think about our very, very beginning students. With that, I mean, sometimes a lot of teachers think, okay, I'm aware that there are a lot of music by Black composers or many different underrepresented composers, but I don't really know. I only see that music in the later, more advanced literature. But I really, really feel that we ought to be looking at music in the most diverse sense from the very beginning of teaching, because perhaps you're like myself. I never played a piece by a Black composer until I was in grad school. And not only that, it wasn't even on my radar to even be thinking about finding music, finding literature. And it also tells me my own teachers, right? They weren't thinking about finding music, finding literature for me to be performing, right? So I often think to myself, what would have it felt like if at age 5, I was learning music by Florence Price, or at age 7, I was learning music by Chevalier de Saint George, right? I think my own understanding of what classical music was, what it can look like, I think as a Black female, as how I identify, I think for one, I would have felt like I belonged in this profession, which is something being completely transparent, really struggled with, because the list that I see in front of me, that's all that was ever fed to me, right? I never saw anything reflected other than dead white males. And that in itself can be very isolating. And then when I went into college, the entire population that shifted as well, right? With who I was used to seeing in the music studios. And then, as you all know as well, we also don't see a whole lot of representation on our concert halls. So I say all of that because not just because I love teaching, and I know you all love teaching, but I think there's so much power that teachers have, because we are the ones who are feeding the music, and whatever we choose, whether we realize it or not, we are saying, this is the music that's important. This is the music that you ought to learn for whatever reasons, A, B, C, or D, right? So I say that to charge you all to go forward, right, with this work. No one needs to have advanced degrees to do this type of work. We just have to make the decision to start using this music. So the first composer that I want to talk about is Florence Price. There's been so much scholarship, so much scholarship on Florence Price, really within the past like 6 years, and rightfully so, really rightfully so. But what we don't often talk about, I feel, with Florence Price, yes, she was a fantastic composer. Yes, she was a phenomenal pianist, but we don't talk about her as being this incredible pedagogue. And she absolutely was a phenomenal teacher. We know that when she was at New England Conservatory, yes, she was studying composition, but she also took courses for pedagogy, right? So she went out of her way to say, yes, this is my major in composition. This is my major. I'm doing a lot of performance, but I also understand the need for wanting to understand how to teach well. And we see that being tracked in her life. So after she leaves New England Conservatory, she comes back down south, and we know that she was teaching. She's teaching in her community, which is primarily Black students. And we can imagine that she probably did not have, Faber or Alfred or, these big publishing companies at her disposal for her students. Her students might not have also been able to, afford going to a music store and purchasing this music. So what is she doing? She's composing. She's creating teaching pieces for her young students. And I absolutely love this because what we have is these two fantastic collections, 2 volumes, I should say, of teaching pieces by Florence Price. Now, each volume is a little bit different, but both of the volumes are brilliant. In one volume, what I love is that in every piece, she wants the student to draw from their imagination. And I think that's something that's left out in a lot of our music, that we need to encourage students to go into that fantasy world, go into your imagination, and bring forth and create alongside your student this life, bringing it to life, bringing the music to life. So she really challenges the student to use that imagination in her music. There are also very specific aims or purposes that she writes in the other in the other volume. And that's more like the technical, the musical demands that she's hoping that the student would be able to reach. So what I want to share first is it's not my favorite. All of them are great, but I chose this because if there was a fan favorite, this is a fan favorite in my studio. Whenever there's a student who plays this in a recital, for my beginning students, I always have at least 2 or 3 more students who say, can I play that next year? Can I play that next year? So this is a fan favorite in my studio. I think you'll hear why if you had like a 5 or 6-year-old, maybe even younger 4-year-old who is just starting off, right? Someone who's in those method books, maybe that first level method book, and you're wanting to supply just something a little bit different. This is a wonderful piece. I'm going to play it for you. It's very short. Then I'll tell you the title of it. It's going to be very obvious. a lot of fun. I'm sure that you can see why students like this. And it's called Crisscross. Crisscross by Florence Price. And you can see right away that the hands get to go on top, and under each other. And some of my students really like to try to show off when it comes to recital time. And they really exaggerate those movements because it makes them feel really good and accomplished that they're showing off this skill at the piano. And really, the audiences love it too. They really do. So, apart from them having a good time, which I definitely feel needs to be the aim when we're teaching, right? Students need to feel good about the music. They need to have fun with it. That's what's going to keep them coming back to our studios every week, honestly, right? But what's happening pedagogically? What I love about this piece is that Florence Price is really grounding the student to understand the geography of the piano, not just here visually at the keyboard, but also understanding these relationships of the notes on the staff. So she allows the student to be grounded in that C in the left hand. That's what keeps repeating. And then the right hand gets to go below the C, below that middle C with ledger lines, and then also above that middle C within the treble clef. And that keeps going back and forth. So what I really enjoy doing is allowing my students to start looking at intervallic relationships, right? And at a very early point in time, we're learning about these ledger lines because Florence Price does it in a phenomenal way. Ground the student in that C and then showcase where that next note is below the key, below the C on a ledger line, and then what that will look like, perhaps even like an octave higher within the treble clef, right? So introducing that concept, these intervallic relationships, whether it's ledger lines or not at an early age, I've noticed very, very quickly that my students' understanding of note recognition has helped tremendously. And what this also does, I love method books. I use a lot of different type of method books. I use a lot of different type of method books because I don't think one method book is the way to go. But what I really don't like about method books is this feeling of being locked into a position, right? So finding music that allows the student to not be able to only play locked in a C or a G and a D position, this really allows them to free themselves up, and it allows them to say, hey, I'm starting to understand a broader and wider understanding of note recognition. This is a really fantastic piece that utilizes that and highlights that. There are so many other great pieces within this set. The other thing I want to say with this set is that there are no dynamic markings. There are no articulation markings. There are no tempo markings either. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity that Florence Price gives us as the teacher to guide the student in whatever ways we need to utilize the music. So if I'm doing crisscross and I just want a student to start speeding up that note recognition, I might start cranking that tempo up a little bit for them, right? In another way, I've really slowed this piece down drastically. And I'll say to a student, let's write in some different dynamics. Let's write in some slurs. Let's write in some staccato notes and allow that to be a study for whatever they need, right? So it really allows us to kind of take the reins and use this piece for whatever means we need for our students' needs. Another composer, again, on this kind of beginning level, if we're looking at levels, this would probably be around a level 3 for a level 3 student. This is Ignatius Sancho. Now, I could spend a whole lecture just talking about the life of these composers, and I try to be mindful of that and really focusing on the music and the pedagogical importance of the music. But I definitely, I'm going to send you a PDF of this and a handout as well. But I definitely encourage you all to really look at the lives of these incredible composers. Ignatius Sancho being one of them. So I don't know about you, but I have a really hard time getting my students excited about early classical or Baroque literature. I think can feel so far removed, especially for our young students. And sometimes I'm just kind of scratching my head and I'm saying, yeah, I mean, I get that, but it's good medicine, right? I need you to be able to do this. And I think Ignatius Sancho, with this particular set, the 12 country dances for the year 1779, set for the harpsichord, I think this is a really unique, fantastic way to get our students excited about this style period of music. And I want to tell you why. So at first of all, you can find this on IMSLP, right? This is public domain. You can pull it up right now and just start playing it away. But what you'll also notice, if you go on IMSLP, look at the original score first, right? Not because you're going to be using that to play from or using it for your students, but what I love about the original score is that Ignatius Sancho writes down dance movements at the bottom of all of these pieces. So if you are up to it, if you're like to get a little movement going in your studio, I like to challenge my students and we'll just kind of make some fun out of it, and we'll create some dance movements that could go along with this music. So I might start playing it. We'll look at the dance steps that are written down at the bottom. I'll challenge my student to do it. I might do it myself. We might try it together. And I say all this because I think it's lost a lot of times that this music is social, right? This was meant for social purposes. It was meant for a good time. It was meant for entertainment. And I think we ought to be approaching this music in that way. And Ignatius Sancho gives us and reminds us that we need to be utilizing this music in that way as well. And really, my students love it. They love the opportunity to get away from the keyboard, to think about the history of the music, understanding that this could have been for the aristocrats. We pretend that we have on big wigs and these big ballroom gowns, and really just paint the scene for why this music was being created in the first place. When you have that imagination and you're in their fantasy world, it really changes the dynamic once we get back to the piano, right? Now, this particular dance, I'm going to play it. Give me 1 second, and then I'll talk about how we utilize it. So this is Lady Montagu Reel. That's the name of this piece. Excuse me, the name of this dance. And what you'll notice right away is that the right hand has these running eighth note passages. The left hand has these quarter notes with wide leaps, right? And we know how important that technique is for our students. It reminds me a lot of, oh goodness, the Gavotte, Handel's Gavotte in G major, right? The one that's like, right? Because it has those eighth notes in the right hand and then those wide leaps in the left hand. And we know how important it is for our students to be able to coordinate that. Ignatius Sancho gives us that exact same situation, right? It gives us the exact same situation for the student to be able to utilize. And another thing that I love about this is that there are no ornaments written out, right? These are ornaments that I just chose to do. And I allow my students, or I should say, I guide my students to also utilize ornamentation on the repeat. And I bring that up for two reasons. One, a lot of times we have students who aren't quite ready, right? They're not quite ready to handle different type of ornamentation, and that's okay. You won't come across this and have a student say, hey, what's that sign right there? Because it's not written out. However, I've also used this entire set for some more advanced students. I had a student about 2 years ago who was working on a Bach partita, and we were really we collectively were struggling with finding good ornamentations to take at the repeats. And I was giving her lots of listening to do. I was putting on my DMA cap and saying, look at this literature. But it wasn't really sinking in. She wasn't really able to internalize it. And I think a lot of it was also because the music is hard. The music is already challenging, and then you're asking them to put on this other hat of what is really improvising on these melodies. So what I thought was, hey, let's tone it back a lot. Let's take a look at these 12 country dances. It's also dance music, right? And what I allowed her to do was take each of these pieces. We worked on one, it was like one every 2 weeks. And she wrote in her own ornaments. And this really allowed her, I think at first allowed her to feel comfortable because the music was much more easy for her for where she was at. And because it was easier, she allowed herself to really dive into the possibilities of creating these different type of ornamentations. So I say that for two reasons. Yes, it's great for our beginning students who are just now starting to do quarter notes and eighth notes, like around level 2 or even 3. But it also can be utilized for even more advanced students who want to take on this challenge of being in the same style period and trying out different ornaments that could really help bring this music to life even more. I want to talk about one more composer, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a break and see if there are some questions or some comments. But the next composer is Valerie Capers, who has this phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal set, which is Portraits in Jazz. It's published by Oxford University Press. And I often talk about this set because I think about myself, right? I think about myself when I started off piano at 5 years old. I had no intention of being a classical pianist. I wanted to be Nina Simone, actually. My dad is a jazz bass player. So jazz music was always in the house, always being filled in all of the rooms. And I said to my dad, that's what I want to be. I want to sound like Nina Simone, both in her voice and then also in her piano skills. So my dad wanted both my sister and I to start off with classical music because he didn't have that. He didn't have that opportunity. He has a fantastic ear and then came to reading much later in life. And he wanted us to try to do the opposite, start with a good foundation of reading. And then, which I didn't get to, branch out to using my ear more to do to do more improvising. But I thought to myself, what if I had a teacher? And by the way, I loved all my teachers, but what if I had a teacher who recognized my want and my need to expand my musical language? I think that this set, Portrait in Jazz, really would have been a phenomenal set to give someone like myself who is saying, I love this classical music that you're giving me, but I also have an itch and a want to be able to play other musical languages, whether it's popular or jazz or anything like that. Now, this is such a great collection because I also have to think about the teacher's point of view. If you're like myself, I wasn't trained to read charts. I wasn't trained to read dash charts. I'm not the best at identifying extended harmonies, jazz, jazz harmonies like that. There we go. Am I muted? Is that good? Okay, good. I just saw a mute button come up.
Yeah, sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. So yes, you don't, as a teacher, you don't have to worry about that because everything is written out. Valerie Capers is being very, very specific of what the student should be playing, how they should be playing, how they should be developing these jazz harmonies and languages. So in this set, she creates 12 phenomenal pieces, and each of the pieces is to illustrate or to highlight or to portray one of the jazz greats. So we have Jelly Roll Morton, we have Ella Fitzgerald, we have Billie Holiday, all of these phenomenal, great jazz artists. And what she does, she asks herself, what is this jazz artist known for? And then how can the pianists, specifically young pianists, how can they emulate that at the keyboard? So what this does, one, it offers a whole new world to our young students. And even if you are entering to a new world, I still like to talk about this as it relates back to classical music. This, for example, this one that I'm about to play, it's called Ella Scott's The Little Lamb. This is after Ella Fitzgerald, and we know Ella Fitzgerald was so well known for her scatting ability, right? So maybe even before we start this, I'll pull up a video. We'll talk about what scatting is if they're not familiar, this verbalization of using syllables in a musical way. And then, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me play it first, and then I'll talk about how I utilize it. So you can hear right away, one, it's short, it's very, very accessible for our young students. And you can hear all of these different type of articulation that's being asked of the right hand. Valerie Capers is very, very specific with every single marking, every slurred note, every tenuto, every staccato, every lift. It's all written out. And I love that. I love that about this piece. So what we enjoy doing in my studio, we start, like I said, with this video of what is scatting, right? What is this understanding, this musical ability to use these different words or these different consonants to bring music to life? And then what we do, which has been a lot of fun with my students, we go through the music and recreate our own scats based on the articulation that Valerie Capers is asking us to do. So we will actually go through and create some syllables that might sound like a two-note slur. We'll create a syllable that sounds like a really punched accent, or we might create a syllable that sounds like a staccato marking. And I really take the time, a week, maybe even 2 weeks, to go through that process with my students. And we're marking up our music in this way. What does this allow us to do? After that, we are actually scatting. We are scatting with the student based upon what the music is asking us to do. And what I've noticed is that when the student is able to internalize what is being asked of them through these different type of articulations, I cannot express enough how quickly they are then able to play that at the piano. I think sometimes as pianists, we forget that we need to sing ourselves, right? We need to be able to internalize and use our voice first in order to be able to have the chance to do it at the keyboard. What I've also noticed with this collection, specifically this piece, Ella Scott's The Little Lamb, it has been so wonderful to either pair this with Bach inventions or to use this as a predecessor to Bach inventions. And I want to tell you why. You might be thinking, wait a second, completely different realm, but actually it's quite similar. When a student finally gets through the coordination of, these handling these melodies with the right hand and then being able to do it with the left hand, what do we always ask them to do? Whatever you do in the right hand, can you create an articulation in the right hand and then be able to create that same articulation in the left hand, right? Being able to understand that both voices, both hands ought to sing. So when we dive and have a really fun and good time with Ella Scott's The Little Lamb, we then just transition that same exact concept over to something like a Bach convention. And that same joy and excitement, it gets pulled over into the Bach convention as well. And that's the goal, right? Keep things exciting. So that's how I use this particular piece. And in generally, this collection is really, really wonderful for our early intermediate students. I want to pause right there if I can and just create an opportunity if there are some questions or comments. Let me go back here to where you all are. There we go. So do you all have any questions or comments so far before I move into more intermediate repertoire?
Well, I was going to say, Dr. Claiborne, that what you were just talking about with Valerie Capers, this is fascinating. I have not run across this yet. Could you tell us, you said Ella Fitzgerald was one of the ones that she was doing. What was some of the others that you mentioned? And I might want to buy this collection. I'm really excited.
Yes, so, I wish I had the collection with me. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. So there's Billie Holiday.
Okay, Billie Holiday.
And that's a beautiful, like this, I don't want to say sultry. It's very sad and sorrowful melody. And I utilize that a lot for voicing and phrase structure. That's a really, really good one. I would say that's probably the next easiest in the collection. There's also Jelly Roll Morton. There's also, gosh,
sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I wish I should have this collection. I'm at my teaching studio at school. But if you could go on, it's so worth it. It's so worth getting it. And you can see it's 12 of the great giants. Oh, thank you, Bethany, for putting
I see it. Okay,
in the chat right there. And you can, I'm sure you can even just look at the table of contents in there and take a look at who is being portrayed in the set. Awesome. I'll also tell you, I mean, I said this before, but I've never felt good enough or, you know, like I studied enough to be able to teach jazz music. And a lot of times I have students who, you know, they're getting into the intermediate repertoire and that's when their musical language wants to start broadening up, right? I really like this collection for that purpose because it's not Bach, it's not Beethoven, but it challenges them in a different way. And I feel comfortable enough as a teacher to just look at the music and say, this is everything the composer's asking me to do. Everything's written out, everything not only is written out, she also writes at the very top of the score what the students should be working on, what they should be trying to accomplish.
Oh, so that's helpful.
Everyone is aware of what the challenge is and what should try to be, what the end goal should be with each of the pieces.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Of course. Anyone else have questions or comments? No? You all are easy. Thank you. All right, then I'm just going to pull up my screen again and we'll keep carrying on. I'll make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so the next composer is William Grant Still. William Grant Still, so much to say about him, right? For one, in my dissertation work, I was speaking to Judith Still, who owned the rights of William Grant Still's music. And when speaking to her, she always brought up that William Grant Still had this childlike spirit about him within his personality. And I remember writing that down and thinking about that a lot, because in this collection that I'm going to talk about, which is called Animal Sketches, you absolutely see that childlike, that fantastical, that imagination come out in his music. And again, with so many of these great composers, these African American composers, we often think of them as being these big giants, which they were, which they are, but we think of them as these composers for this advanced music, whether it is for piano or whether it's for orchestra or chamber or operas. But again, we just like Florence Price, I don't think we think about them in this pedagogical way. But we get these glimpses when they create these type of collections like animal sketches. So in excuse me, in animal sketches, uh, William Grant Still creates 5 sketches of different animals. We have a camel, we have a lamb, we have a horse, we have an elephant, and I'm forgetting one more. It's going to come to me. It's going to come to me. And what William Grant Still does, it's not just I'm going to write a piece about these animals. He's specifically thinking about the movement that these animals make. When I think about an elephant, what are the movements? When I think about a horse galloping, what is that movement? And then he goes further to say, how can I create that movement at the keyboard for the student? So this really is diving into, like I said, the imagination of these young students, because we're familiar with, we're familiar with these animals, and then we're taking it a step farther and saying, okay, let's create that movement at the piano specifically to accomplish some type of technical goal. So what I love, the one I'll be sharing is elephant. And when we think about elephants, we know that they are big animals. They're heavy. He uses a lot of the bass area to, create that gravitas sound. But then what are we challenged with? We're also challenged with being able to handle these triads and being able to voice them, right? Being able to have this thick texture, but also be aware of a melody line. So let me play that and then I'll talk a little bit about it. So each of these are very, very short excerpts, right? And what I love about this one is that right away, the student starts to feel really comfortable with creating this solid hand position, both in the right hand and in the left hand. The tendency, though, is that when, as we all know, right, when you're repeating the same type of patterns, that you don't want the student to start locking up, right? And sometimes, especially when they're saying, hey, I need to play loud, I need to play heavy, I need to be tense, that you can actually use this as an opportunity to relax the hand to be able to create this full sound with voicing as well. So with this particular piece, I love Halloween recitals, by the way. This is a big thing in my studio. And this is always one that I end up teaching this entire set really during October, because the students love dressing up as the animal. But it's not just about dressing up as the animal. They get to physically become the animal at the keyboard, which they love, right? And for us as teachers, what we love is that they're really physically understanding as a musical or technical challenge that they're able to display and demonstrate at the piano. So it's really a win-win, I would say, for this particular collection, which my students and I myself really, really love. I also want to point out, and I'll talk about this again in some of the other composers, is that William Grant Still is often considered the dean of African American music. And speaking with Judith Still, and we often do this to Black composers, is that we put this title on them, something like the dean of African American music, or like Samuel Coleridge Taylor is often considered the Black Mahler, or Chevalier de St. George is considered the Black Mozart. And I bring this up because I really feel that all of us need to and shared, and performed and taught, specifically because it's just great music, right? We don't need to keep comparing it to these other composers, these white composers. Another composer that I recently came across within the past 2 years, came across as far as piano music, is the music by Betty Jackson King. I also want to pause here and tell you that every composer that I am sharing today has other sets of piano music. So it's not just this particular collection, that I specifically wanted to choose composers who have other piano suites, sketches, solo music. So for some reason, if you don't like one thing you can hear, don't stop there. Do look at the composer and look at all of their other piano music that they have created. But with Betty Jackson King, like I said, I came to her music first because I was doing a lot of accompanying for vocalists. And um, we as pianists, we know when something feels good in the hands, right? We know when it's not awkward and it just feels so satisfying to play. That was for me always Betty Jackson King's music. And her melodies, oh my goodness, her melodies are phenomenal. I could play a whole program of different composers, but it was always Betty Jackson King's melody. I would walk away and I would keep humming that melody throughout the day. I don't want to say that it's a catchy melody, but it's one that really just speaks to your heart. I really have to say it speaks to your heart, and you can't walk away without feeling the impact of the way she creates these melodies. So because I was loving her music so much, from the vocal sense, I was so happy to learn that she has other collections for a piano solo as well. She has this sketch, which I'm going to share, which is 4 seasonal sketches, which is, it's good for our intermediate students. We also have another collection by her. It's called, excuse me, it's not a collection, it's a single piece. It's what she calls a tone poem called The Aftermath. That's definitely more advanced. And then she has another really fun set, which is called Mother Goose Parade. This is not at all for young students, but I like to use this if I'm ever playing for children. I like to go out into DC and play for like a lot of youth shelters. So if you're thinking about some fun programming, that's a really wonderful one, because though it's challenging, it's definitely for you as the advanced performer. But what it does, it embeds these different nursery rhymes, these tunes that everyone will be able to quickly identify. And students are like, oh, I know that one. That's Three Blind Mice, or, that's Baba Black Sheep. It's very quick, and it's in your face. So people really, really love that. But back to 4 seasonal sketches. So I first came across this piece for the purposes of teaching. First, I came across this piece because I was performing it. And I was doing my own programming with pairing these pieces with Tchaikovsky's seasons. So what I would do, I would take a couple months from Tchaikovsky, and then I would pair it with one of the seasons by Betty Jackson King. And this really created a phenomenal discussion, I guess you could say, with programming, looking at how 2 different composers, 2 different style periods, 2 different lives would have their take on something as broad and universal as months or seasons. And not just months and seasons as, the physical, but also more about the seasons that we all go through, right? The seasons of life that we all go through, and everyone's stance and interpretation can be a bit different, yet universal. So that's how I was approaching it for my own programming. And by doing so, what I realized right away, I had a student who was working on the G major prelude by Chopin. That's the one that has all the running 16th note passages with the left hand. And I realized very quickly that my student was not quite ready to take on that piece. I thought they were, but as they were playing it, there was a lot of struggle. They were really having issues with passing the thumb and handling these fast, legorial, arpeggiated left hand passage work. So I thought to myself, okay, I don't want to say no to the student, right? But I definitely need to allow the student to understand we still need some more steps before using this piece. So I thought, is there another piece that I can think of that utilizes the same type of technique, but maybe tone it down a couple of levels? And I thought about this piece. This is the first one, which is Spring Intermezzo by Betty Jackson King. So I'll just play a little bit of it and then we can talk about it. So I'll stop it right there. So you can see that it's in ABA form, and you can hear the technique of that running left hand passage work, right? That really is helping the student to understand how to pass that thumb in a legato, light, leggiero way. All the while, you get to play this beautiful melody, right? I just think all of our melodies are fantastic. These are melodies that get stuck in the ear and just allows the student to sing, to really build these phrases in such a beautiful way. So, like I said, I this is how I use the piece. Um, I will say in this collection, this is the first one. So this is the let me think. I don't want to say it's the most accessible, but it's on the easier side compared to the rest. There is also Autumn. That is also quite wonderful for our intermediate students. Autumn is really fun because it has this ground bass, these four notes that just keeps repeating over and over and over for the left hand. The challenge with that one is that although the left hand goes unchanged, the right hand is constantly being asked to do more advanced technique, whether it's consecutive thirds, fourths, octaves, big chords, right? So that one is a little bit more advanced. There's also summer and there's also winter, and they do kind of progressively get harder. So I say this because yes, great for our students. These are the reasons why I use it. But for you yourself, if you're performing, I also love using this within my own programming, whether you want to program it with other composers like Tchaikovsky, or you just want that one piece in between the program. These are absolutely fantastic. You can play the whole set or just choose a couple to include with a larger program. So another composer that I used faithfully every year is Estelle Ricketts. This is Rippling Spring Waltz. This is historically, right, is important because it's the first piano piece that we know of that's been published by a Black female. And along with that, this is such a wonderful piece that asks the pianist to do so much in such a short amount of time. What do I mean by that? I have used this piece a lot in competitions. If you like doing competitions in your studio or you're looking for music that could be well for adjudications, this is one of them. And again, for our intermediate, late intermediate student. And the reason why I've enjoyed it for competitions, but also my students have done well in competitions because in a short amount of time, this student is being asked to handle scale passage work. They're asked to be able to handle double notes. They're asked to asked to handle double third passages, different ornaments, octaves, broken octaves, triplets. It's just one of those pieces. It's like the whole sync, right? Everything that you would want a student to be able to do, it's in this within about 2 minutes, right? So when do I use this piece? If you're familiar with Paderewski's Minuet in G, that's a piece that I played when I was younger, and I never stopped playing it. It was one of those pieces that I just enjoyed playing. My family would come in from out of town. They say, Leah, play me something. That was my piece. Even when I was well past it, it's just something I enjoyed doing. And I think it's because it's that style of music, right? That salon, or what I'm calling this parlor style music, right? It's very satisfying as the performer, but all audience types, right? You don't need to be classically trained to say, that's a really nice piece. That is a typical piano classical piece, right? If someone had that in mind. This is what I feel it also embodies. Let me play a little bit of it and then we can talk about it. you can see again, it's a short piece, right? It's just about 2 minutes. Oh, I forgot I did that. That was for something else. It's about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. And you can see all that's being asked of the right hand, right? It's just constantly changing for the different technique that's being required. But the left hand, for the most part, is going unchanged until the very end. Another piece that I use right before this is that very famous Chopin A minor waltz. I'm sure we all use. I had a student that really, really loved that piece, and they were definitely ready for, that next couple level steps up. This is another great, fantastic moment to allow the student to be able to play this. So, yeah, and I just want to stress really, really great for competitions or adjudications as well. I've noticed that the adjudicators have really enjoyed listening to it, and they have a lot to be able to say and offer because of all that's being asked. Next is my personal favorite composer, Samuel Coleridge Taylor. And one of probably my favorite for a couple of reasons, apart from his music just being phenomenal. He has so much music, so much music for piano. This particular set, the 24 Negro Melodies, I did my dissertation work on this set. And it really is such a, yes, it's a personal set for me because I grew up hearing these melodies. My grandmother, my great grandmother, my own mother singing these constantly in the household. So it was really beautiful to, for me, kind of bridge both of these worlds of what I hear happening at home or in my church, and then also straddling this with this classical world, which at the time for me was that dead white male composers that I was only exposed to. So for me, this was just such a pivotal moment in my own life and in my own research to come across his music in this particular set. I'll also say that within this set, the 24 Negro Melodies, as we all know, a set of 24 in piano is so important, right? We have Bach's Preludes and Fugues in 2 books. We have Scriabin's, we have Chopin's Etudes and Preludes. I really feel that it was purposeful that Samuel Coleridge Taylor is creating a set of 24 something, right? A set of 24 piano pieces for our instrument that needs to be utilized. It needs to be a staple in our literature. Just like we often use, the Mendelssohn Song Without Words, we have this opportunity, 24 opportunities even, to help our students be able to handle a melody. All of these melodies are from Negro spirituals. There are 6 that are specifically from countries in West Africa, and we can hear how those specific melodies are so similar to what we have now as the spiritual. So within this set, what you'll hear is that the melody is always stated as purely as possible within the first couple of bars. And I really think that Samuel Coleridge Taylor, honoring the music, honoring the spiritual, honoring how raw and authentic this music is, he always states the melody as, I'm saying plainly in a beautiful way, as plainly as possible. And then as the music unfolds, he allows it to become the texture to build. The pianist is asked to be able to handle this melody in many, many different ways. So the one that I'm not perform, I am performing, but the one that you'll hear is I'm Troubled in Mind. This was also, we do know, one of Samuel Coleridge Taylor's favorite melodies. There are many famous melodies within this set, like Wade in the Water. Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, Steal Away, right? All of these big ones that we are aware of. But this is one that does not get performed nearly as much. It's not one that we sing nearly as much, but it was one of his melodies, favorite ones. And it's truly one of my favorites as well. So I'll just play a little bit of it, and you can hear how it's stated always very, very clearly. The melody stated plainly and clearly, and then it quickly becomes developed more and more. So I really love this entire set. Um, Really, every last one of these are so, so powerful and it's so moving. And it's so satisfying to play. And I want to bring this up because for two reasons. One, I always often get this question, do I have the right to play this music? Especially something like the Negro spiritual, right? And I always tell people that this is a personal belief, right? Personally, I feel that when we approach music with sincerity, when we want to do all that we can to understand the history, just like we would want to do with Beethoven, um, when we when we look at Beethoven or Bach, we want to know about their lives. We want to know about what's happening in society and history during the time of the making music. We might even look at their contemporaries. What are they making? What are they creating, I should say. We might also listen to some of their other works, like their symphonies or chamber music, right? So that we're more well informed. This is exactly how we ought to approach this music as well. We need to look at our history, our American history. We need to know why this was being created, why it was being performed. And we also have a composer like Samuel Courage Taylor who's writing so much other music so that we can understand his specific musical language. So I offer that to all of you as teachers and performers to not shy away from this music. I also feel that there's so much that's universal about these feelings, right? This is called I'm troubled in mind. I think can all express that we have moments of feeling that we are just in complete despair, that we are absolutely troubled, that we have these feelings of being locked in chains, whether that's physical chains or that could be emotional chains, right? And just wanting that feeling of being able to take that burden away from us, right? So I offer that to say these are universal feelings and emotions that we all have. And I do feel that if we are willing to do the work and do it with sincerity, that this is music for all people. And I think we should also approach that with our students as well. I will say that I don't think all of these particular spirituals are appropriate for all students, right? Some of this is very heavy music, like this one as well, right? But there are also lighter ones like I'm going up. I'm going up to heaven. I'm going up and I want to be light on my feet and my toes and celebrate, right? So I think we as teachers, we need to navigate what is appropriate, not just musically or technically, but also the content, right, behind the music. The other point I want to bring up with this, though, I always leave this at the end because I do hope that you can also see prior to this particular piece, there's so much variety and character of music by Black composers. And it's not all about heaviness and despair and trauma and oppression, right? I often feel teachers think that, I only have this spiritual or some type of arrangement of the spiritual or something that reminds me of slavery. Yes, that is part of the literature with Black composers, but there's so much as well that just reminds us of the sunshine in spring, like Betty Jackson King, or that we can scat and have a good time with Ella Fitzgerald, or that we can try to embody what it feels like to be an elephant at the piano, right? There's so much variety and musical language by so many different types of composers. So I wanted to bring that to you all today. There's one more composer that I wanted to share, which is Nathaniel Dett. And I'll kind of end with that, I think, if I'm doing okay with time and leave some time for questions. But I want to end with Nathaniel Dett because Nathaniel Dett was my first Black composer. I'm so embarrassed to say that I was at the end of my at the end of my master's before I ever touched a piece by a Black composer. And I always make my teacher laugh about this, but he was asking me, haven't you played a piece by a Black composer? And I thought to myself, no. And why are you asking me of all people, right? Are you asking everyone else this? And that's because I just didn't know, right? I didn't know what was out there. And I'm so glad that now I do know, right? I do know that there's so much that has been written specifically for piano. And the reason I approached it in this way, my research in this way, is because I didn't want for students to come across another 27 years of playing piano and never having touched a piece by a Black composer. So I really wanted to look at not just look at music for performance for advanced repertoire by Black composers, but really start to think about at the earliest levels of being in, you know, that first level uh, piano book, method book. And from that point all the way up to college, all the way up into performing as a professional, what are the markers? What are the pieces that can help students advance in their studies through the use of Black composers? Again, not so with Nathaniel Dett, he was kind of my starting point. And he's the one that really brought it all home for me. And this particular set is probably the most popular in the bottom suite. The very last set, excuse me, the last dance in this music and in this suite is called Juba Dance. And Juba is probably one of the most well performed pieces. It's in many different popular collections today. It's definitely more in the advanced, advanced levels. And it should be. It's very popular and it's fun and it's entertaining. But one piece that's not performed nearly as much in this same exact set is Morning, and it's called Morning slash Barcarolle. All of the pieces have two different titles, a very classical title and then a very descriptive title. And I love this piece, again, for our more late intermediate, early advanced students, because this allows our students to showcase again so much in such a little amount of time. Again, if you're thinking about competitions, I've had two students who do this. They do so well in the competitions. One, honestly, it's not so well known. So I think judges have a little bit more of an open ear, right? It's not like they're listening to the 27th performance of a Beethoven sonata. So it's refreshing for them. And I think they look at that and say, hey, what is all that this composer asking of this student? What you'll hear right away is that there's this portrayal of being able to be on a summer day in the South. You're out on a boat and you hear the oars going back in the water and pushing the boat or pushing the music forward. When we have students that say, why do I need to play scales? Right away at the very beginning, you'll notice the right hand has to play these light, leggiero, sparkling 2-octave scales. And then in the B section, we really allow the student to be able to understand what sound is coming back to them. The melody is in the middle of the piano. It's divided between the hands, right, right, left. It's alternating in that melody, but at the same time, the left hand has to also create accompaniment in the very low register and the high register, both hands in the high register. So it's this constant ability to take care of a melody in the middle and also be able to handle the full range of the piano. It takes a lot of voicing technique and just a lot of musical understanding and interpretation. for the sake of time, I'll stop it right there. But not to say don't play the entire set, do play the entire set, but this is really a phenomenal one that offers so much technically and musically for our students. And for us too, if you're performing and looking for, some music to add to your program, this is a really, really wonderful piece to add to that. Again, Nathaniel Dett has a huge collection of pieces by, other suites for piano. And his musical language, I keep using this word universal, because it is. We can all imagine what it feels like to be on a boat on a summer day, and feel those oars in the water. Or we can all imagine what it feels like. The very first one is called Night, and what that feels like to be in this very atmospheric, um, dark scene. And then the lights turn on, and then you're in this dance house party, if you will. But these are all feelings, all emotions that no matter what your race is or what class you're in, no matter what your economical, what your socioeconomical income is, these are all things that is part of the human spirit. And I think this music speaks to that. It speaks to the human spirit, and it allows us to be able to understand history in a little different and unique way, I feel. And that's why I love the music. Apart from it being phenomenal music and music that my students love and I love, it allows us, I think, to bring the history a little bit more forward. And it allows us to literally have our hands on it, and interpret it and understand it in a unique way. So I hope this was helpful for you all. I hope you hear something that you like, that you might be able to use in your studio as well. I'm just going to stop sharing that and come back here. There we go. So did you all have any questions or comments or anything? Nope.
Well, I was going to mention, I was very listening to what you were saying about the lack of exposure to Black composers, and really, there's so many great composers out there that we don't use in our studios. So, but in my undergraduate degree, I played a piece by Samuel Coleridge Taylor, and I think it was my favorite one that entire semester.
Yeah.
I grabbed onto the emotion, that it was deep. Was it
Deep
one of
River.
the spirituals, Deep River? It may have been Deep River, I think it was. And I couldn't get away from practicing that one. I loved it, the way he handled it. And of course, sometimes as a music major, you're sitting in the practice room alone, and you feel isolated. And so that really spoke to me, that spiritual. So I was glad that you included him on the list. His writing is just gorgeous. So it was very personal to me as well.
Thank you for sharing. Actually, Deep River was the first one from the set that I learned, and it's a very
Yeah.
emotional journey that you take as a performer, with
Yes.
that particular piece.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I
Yeah.
saw you need published. What I'm going to do, if I can, Becky, can I send out a handout that I have? I meant to send this before, but what it does, it just has the pieces that I listed, a recording of it, and then also where to find the music.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
what
Thank
I'm also
you.
doing, we also just started a nonprofit, which is ebonymusic.org. We just created a partnership with MTNA. You'll also see this within our organization, but we have all the pieces that I talked about today, as well as what we're calling our top 10 list. So it's hopefully encouraging teachers to start looking at, a top 10 for the junior, the young artists, junior, senior, and young artists for their competitions. So we'll be sponsoring a prize at the national level for the best performance of a Black composer. So in our lists, also with the list that with the music I shared today, you'll see the composer, a little bit about the composer. You'll have the recordings that we ourselves have made or others have made. You'll see some pedagogical notes to be thinking about. And you'll also have a direct link for the music if you just want to go ahead and purchase it right away. So you don't have to go shopping around or Googling things, which is also great. But if you just need to have a one-stop shop, that's a good access point for you as well. If you're wanting to look at where to purchase the music or just listen. I think listening is so important. We just need to listen to the music and understand it. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah. Is there any questions more?
Well, you all have been phenomenal. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this important music. Important to me, I hope important to you as well. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I believe that it was the informative time
Good.
to our members. And thank you for sharing really amazing musics
Of course.
composed by Black composer. Was really, yeah, really informative.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Of course. You all have a wonderful day.
You
Enjoy.
too. Thank you.